already finished lesson 1. So congratulations for doing that. Good job. We do have a few early ones who have completely listened to us well, but we'll wait for those next week. Thank you for your efforts and keeping up to date. Next slide, please. If you have not been able to access the training yet, we sent a reminder email a couple days ago. But to log in, you go to our site, mentalhealthmatterswa.com, select login from the navigation menu, enter the username you receive and the password you created as part of this process. Once you go to the training page, select the 2024 PMHN training in English. Once you are inside the training, you can scroll down and read the program information objectives and then access lesson 1 to get started. You need to do this in a linear form, which means you have to complete things in order as they appear on the lessons. And then to navigate to the lessons, you can use previous or next buttons. You can also have an expand button, either on the side navigation or in the main area, and you can expand so you to see the contents of a lesson. And one last reminder is to always, once you complete one of these sections or pages, to mark that as complete. And then the whole lesson, once you're done, it will be marked as complete automatically. Next slide, please. And as just a quick reminder that as part of the requirements of this program, that the agreement form is in lesson 1.2, where you can take that really quick. It's very short. And so that's one of the requirements to complete the agreement form. Then to complete the pre-test or pre-survey that is following the agreement form, there's going to be a post-test towards the end of lesson 5. There's going to be also 2 more surveys after 6 months and 12 months of completion to follow up. And then among others, we also ask you to please, as a requirement, attend the live sessions every week, participate in at least one of our many virtual offerings, round tables, etc. Could be a community event in person within 1 year, and also make an effort to participate in discussions with others. It could be your family, your friends, or members of your community, with at least 5 people within 1 calendar year. Yeah, thank you so much, and I will pass it to Noemi.
Thank you, Anita. So now is the time to meet the team. You already know us from the 2 weeks ago when we did this introduction, but I want to just do it again because it's very remarkable always to recognize the hard work that everybody does in this team to get today. So my name is Noemi Rivera. I'm the lead community navigator. I am in contact with you in emails along with Anna. So probably you guys hear my name before. We have our co-director and principal research investigator, Jody Early, who next to Sandra Hubert is the co-director and community engagement specialist. So everything is possible and able because of them. We have also Aaron Davis, who is the youth mentor and harm reduction specialist, along with Shakira Cruz Roman, who is our mental health therapist that you're gonna meet her today. So, and Anna Thompson, Anna, instructional designer and technical advisor, and Edith Huerta, our mental specialist, resort and specialist, and she's a former navigator as well. So thank you, everyone. And also, I want to introduce our facilitator and mental health navigator, Luisa Vega. She is being with us since the first cohort in English, and we are so proud of her because she always supports us to help in the training. So she's one of us as well, and you guys gonna have the opportunity to meet her today too. Also, I want to talk about the calendar. So to make sure that you guys put in your notes when we're going to meet us. So today is the first lesson, and we're going to meet again next Sunday, same hour, like Sandra said. It's the same Zoom link. So it's going to be April 14. And then we're going to go with a session 3 in April 21st, session 4, April 28th, and our last session is going to be on May 5th. So, okay, so we are looking forward to complete our cohort with you guys. So thank you so much. And now I'm gonna pass it out to Edith.
Hello, everyone. It is with great pleasure that I get to introduce our licensed mental health provider, Shakira Cruz Roman, who is a queer Puerto Riqueña politicized healer, mental health therapist, clinical supervisor, and facilitator. Shakira works from a liberation health, trauma informed, and transformative justice perspective that seeks to integrate the impacts of systems of oppression, cultural influences, and personal experiences into the liberation and healing journeys of their clients. And Shakir has nearly 2 decades of experience working with survivors of trauma, people of color, and the LGBTQA plus communities through advocacy, individual and group therapy, mentorship, and when not facilitating, Shakira can be found at brunch, hanging out with her cat, or laughing with chosen friends and family. Thank you so much for being here, Shakira, and we're so glad to hear from you and share your wisdom, your knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
I mhm,
Thank you,
pass it
Eddie,
back
for
to
that
you.
wonderful introduction, our mental health therapist, Shakira Cruz Roman. Okay, so now we're going to start with the Padlet. Thank you so much for the huge response on the Padlet. I was reading this morning and before, a few minutes before we start the meeting, about the Padlet. So I want to just share a little bit about that because I was so glad to see all these posts. Just let me bring it here. Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. If somebody still need to add something or put a post, please go ahead. This is the time. So wonderful to see all the words that you express about stigma, about community. I see a lot of beautiful statements about that. I think this is the time, right? After being all these years, I may probably insulate or trying to get help, finally we are can able to talk about these issues without any restrictions. So that's why we are here, right? So thank you so much. Like I say, it's wonderful to see the acknowledgement and everything that you guys share with us. So we are so pleased about that. I always like to read it, and sometimes I comment, sometimes I just I like, because honestly, it's a lot of things to learn from you. So thank you so much. Like I say, somewhere is missing that part, please feel free to join on the conversation and share with us. Okay, so now let me just stop here and I will go
And
back
if
to.
it's important to know if anybody is having trouble accessing the Padlet, please let us know. For some of you, it might be a new app, and our younger folks keep us up to date with the different apps that are out there. But please, no shame if you, it took me a little while to figure out how to work it, but the powerful comments and the information you share, both personal, professional, on the Padlet is really, really valuable. And we read all of those. We take ideas from there. We know where to put more emphasis because you're willing to share from the heart on the Padlet. And every week, right, and correct me, Anna, if I'm wrong, every week it refreshes in the sense that then for the next week, you'll have another opportunity to start a brand new wall of Padlet. So if you didn't get to it this week, don't feel bad. You'll have plenty of opportunities to share your thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, now we have the icebreaker. So probably this is another way to learn. We have these apps, but probably somebody's familiar, somebody's not. I'm gonna ask Anna if she can share the link in the chat, and then you guys can share a word as responding this question, right? What is some examples of person-centered language? So I hope Anna can help us with the chat. You guys can see the link, and then after that, I'm gonna share. So please go ahead, just click that link and answer the question. Go to the
Okay, and part of the purpose of that is we all come in with different backgrounds, different ideas, and different lived experiences. And what mental health means to me might be different than what it means to Isela or to Luisa. So your responses are anonymous, but it will help us have a baseline, a feeling for what you're bringing into this discussion, because even though you may think that you're coming in to be taught anything, it's a mutual and reciprocal experience. We learn as much from you as you do from us. So we'll just give it another 30 seconds and see what we got. All right. So let's take a look at what we have. Thank you so much for sharing. And Anna, is this the one that makes a word puzzle or just collects the information?
I'm not sure how you set it up, Noemi. Is it just the responses? Okay.
yeah, just responses.
All right. Okay, well, you can keep on adding anything else that comes up. And then from here, I think it's time, the long-awaited time, for you to get to hear from our mental health provider who's going to be guiding us through the next, this week and the next 4 weeks. So I'll pass it on to Shakira.
Thank you. So let's review a little bit just what are the basics of what is mental health. I saw on the Padlet that a lot of you already really resonated with some of these definitions and some of the experiences connected to our mental health. So we can think of our mental health as our emotional, psychological, and social state. Our mental health affects the ways that we think, feel, and act. It can also really impact how we manage stress, relate to other people, and the choices that we make. So sometimes people will say, why does mental health even matter? And I think this is a really great description of why it matters, because it has impacts on so many areas of our life and is really important at all stages of our life, including from childhood, really from infancy, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and even into our old age. And sometimes folks think that the words mental illness or mentally ill and poor mental health are the same or are interchangeable, but they're really not the same thing, right? We all have mental health and physical health or spiritual health potentially. And those things are not the same as being ill or mentally ill. So a person can experience poor mental health or mental health challenges and not be diagnosed with mental illness. Similarly, someone who's diagnosed with a mental illness can also experience periods of physical, mental, and social well-being. Next slide, please. I'd love to hear from all of you who've looked at the module, but also just generally, what are some of the basic definitions and factors that you saw influence mental health? What were some of the key terms? And remember to use the raise your hand function so we can see who is ready to share. You're also welcome to put it in the chat. Let's see, I think I saw a hand go up. Anna.
Hi. Yeah, I have a key term that really stuck in my mind, which was trauma. And trauma is an event or a series of events where it creates a big shock and it just stays there and it it stays with you and then you have to work with it because it doesn't give you well-being.
Thank you, Anna. I see that Ruth also shared the word trauma and you highlighted, right? It's a big, shocking event. It's often something that we think of that risks or threatens our physical or mental well-being or our dignity. And I see that some other folks put PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, on there. And I love that trauma and PTSD both came up, right? So many of us can experience traumatic events in our lives, something that threatens our life, our well-being, or our dignity, or is too big or too hard to cope with. And some folks who experience trauma may develop post-traumatic stress disorder, but not everybody will. And we'll talk more about that as we go on through our series together. I see depression on there. So depression being a mental health challenge or mental health diagnosis where people feel low, down, depressed. Maybe they feel a loss of interest in regular activities. And we'll talk about common diagnoses a few sessions from now. Someone put ACEs on there, and we'll talk a little bit more about ACEs or adverse childhood experiences in a couple slides. Good job. I see anxiety, another common mental health diagnosis or experience. Intervention. I'm curious, Natalie or anyone else, would you like to share what you think of when you hear the word intervention related to mental health?
I guess I can touch a little bit on that since I said it. I feel like a lot of people, when they think of mental health, they think of prevention, which is great. But like when it comes to the intervention, that's where people may struggle a little bit because everybody is different and how folks respond to those that help is going to look different too. So I don't know why I was so drawn to the intervention section, but I really appreciated that one.
Thanks for chiming in, Natalie. Yeah, I love that you brought intervention up, right? That there are things that we can do, ways that we can intervene around mental health or mental health challenges. And one thing I like to think about with intervention, right? That there are interventions that lots of different people can do. So as a licensed mental health professional, one of the interventions I can offer is individual therapy. As peer mental health navigators, interventions you can offer include supportive listening, offering resources, and we'll talk a little more about what are some of those interventions and views that peer mental health navigators can offer. And it's a good reminder that there are many pathways to healing. There's no one correct or wrong way for any one person to experience healing or interventions around mental health. What other key terms or words stood out for you all, or any that you have any questions about that maybe didn't quite make sense or you were left wondering about after the module? I see oh good. I had just made a note on my page. Thank you for folks who remember to add resilience to the list of words. So resilience is such an amazing human quality. It is our ability to heal, to become strong again and succeed after things have happened or challenging things have happened. So thinking back to how we talked about trauma being these really negative, threatening events, our resilience really helps us heal from that and can be really protective around not developing more significant health or mental health impact. I saw mental health promotion, stigma, another definitely ACEs chiming in on that. That looks great, y'all. Any other words? Let me check for any raised hands I might have missed. All right, let's go to the next slide. So when talking to others about mental health, it's really important to use person-centered language. And person-centered language really is language that puts people first, right? So we want to always see people for their humanity and for who they are, and not just see them for their mental health condition or diagnosis. So this is a crucial way that we can know how to say something that's really supportive and try to avoid words that can further hurt or isolate people. And you all added some examples earlier during our icebreaker, and here are a few more. We can talk about people who are affected with mental illness, someone who's being treated for a mental illness or mental health disorder, a person who has a diagnosis of depression. We could say a person living with anxiety. What other examples, if any, would you all like to add? And so noting, we're often saying a person with or a person who experiences something versus starting with the disorder. So any other examples? Greg, I see at some point I'd be curious about what to do when the person in question does not use such language. So Greg, if I'm understanding, you're asking about if you're talking to someone and you're trying to use person first language, but that's not the way they refer to themselves, then what do you do? Does that sound accurate for your question? Right, okay. Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think we have two options there. We can continue to use person first language and think of it as a supportive way to continue to interact. The other option is always to mirror the language that people use for themselves. And sometimes we can even ask, we can say, oh, I noticed that you said, I am a depressed person. And I was taught that saying a person with depression might be more supportive. Is there language that you would prefer I use when talking with you? So you can always check in to see what are the words that a person is most comfortable with when referring to themselves. That was a great question. Any other examples or questions at this point?
When somebody is substance dependent, that was another example.
Can you repeat that real quick? I didn't hear it.
Yeah, when somebody is substance dependent, instead of saying addict or.
Yes, that's great. So when someone is substance dependent versus saying when someone is in like a drug user, for example. Sandra, I see your hand up.
I think a very important one that I'm so glad we are using more often now is when we're referring to somebody who's ended their life through suicide, that we refrain from saying committed suicide, but that we say that they have died by suicide, because even if you don't eat well and your diabetes gets bad and you die from that, nobody says you committed diabetic, death or something. You say, well, they died from diabetes. So it's the same one here.
That's an excellent example. And some of the reason why we've made that shift in language is because when you hear the word committed, sometimes we think about a crime, right? Like someone committed a crime or someone is committed in a hospital, right? It kind of, that word committed really brings up some stigmatized language. And so saying someone died by suicide really helps reduce that stigma or judgment as if it was somebody's fault or failing versus this illness caused their death. I see in the chat advice to stay away from naming the illness or diagnose the person. Absolutely, Danielle. Not saying weak person or a weak-minded person, that's great. So thinking about the ways that we can stay away from making it seem as if mental illness is a moral failing of an individual versus a condition that we'll talk again and you all have started to see can be really impacted by a variety of factors that have nothing to do with someone's self-worth. All right, let's go on to the next slide. I love that one of the things that's really important to know is that the mind and the body are in fact connected, right? So the mind-body connection refers back to the ways that our physical self and our mental, emotional, psychological selves are in fact connected, so that how we think can affect how we feel, and how we feel can impact how we think. And I don't know if any of you remember, there used to be a commercial many, many years ago about how depression hurts. And I think that was the first time in my life that I got exposure to the idea that a mental health condition like depression physically hurts in your body, right? And so here are some examples of how anxiety and depression can impact the body. It can cause headache, create a lack of energy or fatigue. People tend to have difficulty sleeping or sleep a lot. There's a loss of libido. Often trouble concentrating is related to experiences of depression or anxiety. It impacts all sorts of things. People often experience stomach aches or nausea or other gastrointestinal challenges. It can impact your reproductive organs, causing more painful periods, low sperm production. So when we experience a mental health challenge, it impacts our physical sort of chemistry, our neurotransmitters, the hormones in our body, that really can impact our organs and every part of our being. Likewise, our emotions can impact our physical body, right? So they say that anger can weaken your liver. Grief often is thought of as weakening your lungs or making it really difficult to breathe and breathe deeply. Worry releases chemicals that weaken our stomach or give us stomach aches or more acid in our stomach. Stress can weaken our hearts and make us more susceptible to heart conditions. And fear can weaken our kidneys and change the way that we process all the chemicals in our body. Next slide, please. And you all have started to touch on how profound stigma is and can be. I was looking at the Padlet, and there was an example that I thought was really good to connect to this visual of the way that stigma happens on an internal level, an external level, a community level, and a structural level. And so someone shared that they grew up in a conservative religious community, which could be seen as a community level, and that within that community, there were some really negative or harmful beliefs about women, which we could think of as a structural level in a way, the ways that our structures shape our beliefs. And the external level, this person shared they also experienced bullying at school. And the internal level, they shared that it really impacted their feelings of self-worth. And that's an example of how mental health stigma on multiple levels can impact our beliefs about people, ourselves, mental health, and can then manifest on all these different levels. Stigma includes things like labeling, right? So a good example of labeling, I think JJ put, was like a weak person or a weak-minded person. That would be a label. It often comes from the use of power or the misuse of power. Instead of being towards supporting people with mental health challenges, is towards putting them down or silencing them or not giving resources. Social exclusion, I think, is a really important piece of mental health stigma. There's currently a podcast out by KUOW, I think, called Lost Patients, and it has to do some with the history of mental health in Washington and mental health services and treatment, and touches on some elements of stigma and societal structures that exclude folks with mental health or substance use challenges. And a lot of this goes back into our history. So it's not just a common day challenge. It comes from a long history of discrimination against people with mental health challenges. And I'm glad you're all here today because I think we are continuing to move as a society and in many of our cultures towards more inclusion, acceptance, and affirming views of people with mental health challenges. And let's go to the next slide. With that in mind, in terms of how do we keep moving towards more healthy views of mental health and mental health challenges even, it seems like learning about the adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, has been really helpful for all of us, I think, in being able to put in context maybe sometimes where some of these mental health challenges could come from and what contributes to them. And it helps us learn about what are the things we can do to help improve those conditions Like we were saying, someone was saying earlier, right? Both in terms of prevention, how can we avoid negative experiences or adverse experiences that can jeopardize somebody's physical and mental health, but also how can we intervene now to counteract some of those things. So some examples of adverse childhood experiences that lead to some negative physical and mental health outcomes include physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, physical and emotional, living with an alcoholic parent, having a family member in jail, the disappearance of a parent through divorce, death, or abandonment, experiencing or witnessing domestic violence or partner abuse. And all of these things, the study around ACEs showed can really impact someone's overall psychological well-being, the way someone thinks and feels about themselves, their relationships at work, at home, with friends, their ability to create and use positive coping skills, and our ability to manage our feelings. And it sounds like folks were saying, I saw on the Padlet, I think someone said, I wish I had known about this sooner. It would have made such a difference in how you understood your life, your world, and the world around you, and help you be a better sort of support person in the world. So I do like to say, right, like not all hope is lost. Knowing about ACEs and this sort of groundbreaking research helps us understand what we can do differently and understand the impact of this. So some of the protective factors or counter ACEs as they're listed here. So the things that can really help buffer a young person from the lifelong effects of these adverse childhood experiences. Liking school. So some kiddo who really loves to go to school is a really great protective factor. Having a teacher who cares, or truly having any one adult in your life that you feel like really cares about you, looking out for you, takes an interest in you, or celebrates you is a huge protective factor. And I wonder, yeah, for how many of us out there, we might be able to think of some safe adult in our life, a teacher, a minister, a cousin, an auntie, someone who we felt really loved us and cared for us and might still feel that way about them today. That we know they'll always love us and look out for us and want the best for us. Yeah, exactly, Monica. Our support systems are so important. Other protective factors or counter ACEs are opportunities to have fun. It's fun to think about back to the mind-body connection. We talked some about the ways that depression and anxiety can negatively impact the body. But another thing that we know is that laughter really is medicine to the body and soul. Laughing and smiling releases chemicals in our bodies that can help heal us, can help lighten some of those heavy chemicals that are in our bodies and in our brain. Having a predictable home routine. So that predictability, I know what's coming, I know what to expect. That can feel really safe for young people, especially, but for all of us. Feeling comfortable with yourself is a really important, can be a good and important counter or protective factor, counter ACE or protective factor. I don't know if you've ever been with a young person who you've seen many challenges they've gone through, or maybe you yourself were that young person, but there is some sort of confidence they have about themselves. I met a soon to be 12-year-old recently who has had some experiences many of us might be familiar with. She immigrated to the US in early elementary school, has been learning English and acculturating, lots of challenge, some other challenges in her life. And she looks at pictures of herself as a little kid and she goes, oh, I was so adorable. And it just delights me to hear her say that, because it says that she has this really good view of herself, even as a little kid. And hopefully will continue to have that through these teenage years ahead of her. Beliefs that provide comfort are a really important counter ACE. And so those beliefs could come from anywhere. They can come from a religious or spiritual community, from your cultural community, from your schools. They can just come from inside you, magical thinking, from books. So any beliefs that provide comfort or hope are really good and protective factors. Having good friends and neighbors is a good protective factor or counter ACE. And so those are all some things that we can think about as members of our own communities about ways that we can help contribute to those counter ACEs and protective factors, and how we can think about the ones that we maybe also experience as protective factors in our lives. When we think about helping reduce the consequences of ACEs that maybe have already occurred, in addition to these protective factors, there are some intervention type things we could think about. And the main one that I like to remember is the opportunity to experience positive experiences, to have joyful experiences. So that ability to have wonder or joy in the world can really help counteract some of the negative impacts of adverse experiences. And like we said, continuing to promote these counter ACEs or protective factors. Any questions about ACEs or these protective factors or counter ACEs that folks have, or comments you'd like to add? And again, feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand. I wonder if any of this felt surprising for folks. Was there anything in the material about ACEs or protective factors, counter ACEs, that felt surprising or shocking or unexpected? I see Danielle shared, it also helps when someone can feel comfortable, accepted in their local community. Absolutely. That sense of belonging somewhere is hugely protective. Brandon, I see your hand up.
I just wanted to mention the positive effects of third spaces. Third spaces are places that aren't your home or school that you can go, that you don't have to that you can just be, and they're important. That it's not places that you have to spend money. And with my generation, the opportunity for those spaces has been dwindling, and a lot of people, including me, think that is a big reason for why a lot of people struggle with their mental health.
Yeah, you cut out a tiny bit at the end, but I think we got that, Brandon. And I'm so glad you brought up third spaces. I do think about this a lot, how protective third spaces can be. Can be a coffee shop, a library. Yeah, maybe dating myself. When I was growing up, I definitely just hung out at the mall and went to the bookstores at the mall. I didn't spend any money, but it was somehow a safe and accepted place that kids could just be dropped off there for a few hours. And those can also be really wonderful. Third spaces of all kinds can be wonderful places, a local park, somewhere that folks can go, hang out, be together, feel safe, and connect. I had seen another hand. Katerina, I don't know if you wanted to share.
Well, I just reading the message, and I'm kind of that's why I lower my hand, because it's fabulous the way that we are learning this. Just because, for example, I do have a kid, my son, he's autistic, and he's 25 years old, 26 actually. And sometimes I feel that it's sad that I learned this right now, back to 20 years ago. If I have this knowledge about what we are learning today, probably I have more capacity to help him, even in the provider side, because it was a little stigma 20 years ago about autism. So I don't know. I'm very grateful that we are doing this right now, learning. But yeah, definitely I was surprised on first time in my life I heard about this screen. And that is a good question that I would love that somebody respond, from Jiran. I hope I'm pronouncing correctly.
Yeah, thank you for including that around autism. And a couple notes about autism. One I'll say is that when it comes to autism, the idea of person first language is kind of different. We do say an autistic person, and my understanding from folks who are autistic is that that is the correct way to say that. So that instead of saying a person with autism, lots of folks who are autistic or on the autism spectrum are like, I'm an autistic person. And that is the correct way to refer to folks who are neurodivergent in that way. And then I also just shared the word neurodivergent, right? So there is so much more language and acceptance for the idea that some people's brains are different. And I kind of lean on the side of like all people's brains are pretty different, and that neurodivergence exists on a spectrum from maybe there's neurotypical people, people who feel very comfortable thinking in the way that our society has said is the accepted or common way that people think, feel, interpret information. And there's neurodivergent. And neurodivergence or neurodiversity includes a myriad of beautiful ways that people think, act, and feel. It can include sensory differences or sensory experiences, so things having to do with your five senses, how you move through social experiences, your special interests, things like stimming or self-stimulation, like fidgeting, we tend to think of it as, and we can see that there's so much value in those things that had historically been so stigmatized. And yes, I agree. Great question. How have ACEs and the knowledge of ACEs been included or used in regular health screenings since the research came out? Because I'm not a medical professional, I can't speak to that as well, but I will say for mental health screenings, that's why when we do mental health screenings as mental health professionals, we ask about these experiences people have had in childhood. We ask about any traumatic experiences. We ask about people's family backgrounds. We ask about any exposure or experiences that they have with substance use. So as a mental health professional, we learn these ACEs, these adverse childhood experiences, and we include them in how we get to know people so that we can better understand their life experiences. I think as peer mental health educators, it's also really important for you all to know them and keep them in mind. So as people share their stories with you, it just might be something that you file away, or maybe you share with them information about ACEs so that they also get the benefit of that knowledge. And I will pass it on in the interest of time to the next person. I think Sandra's up next.
Thank you, Shakira. That was an excellent description of ACEs. And just in a little side note, I volunteered for 5 years at the Monroe Prison with a group of Latino men, amazing men. And I snuck in the ACEs evaluation because they don't let you do that. And when I looked at it, my heart was breaking because they had so many that I almost felt like they never had a chance to succeed with all those impacted, and here they are. Not that that means it excuses whatever it is that brought them to jail, but it gives you a wider, more compassionate understanding of their experience. They didn't have anybody, they didn't have any adults, they didn't have so many of these things. So I am so glad we got to talk about that today. So thank you. And with that, we move to our models of engaging with the community, and particularly in this trainings. And those are peer education and popular learning. And peer is, it's a word that I'm still trying to figure out in Spanish, but peer is like when you see young people that they listen to people that are closer to their age and to their experience. Moms hang out with moms. Those are peers. And it's a way of teaching or co-teaching where we see each other as equal, not as I am an authority and you are somewhat below. You know, the idea is that like I said at the beginning, that people learn at the same level with each other. And popular learning is exactly that, a way of engaging with community where there is an expectation of an interaction that is both beneficial for the person asking the questions and the person answering the questions. And we learn from each other. And it's not like, oh, you are the specialist, you're the person with the knowledge, because nobody knows better about your experience in your life than you. So that is how this curriculum is created and all the work that we do. Next slide. All right. So we have now come to that point to do the breakout rooms, and Jody is going to help us with that.
Yeah, before we get started, I just wanted to explain a little bit about our training, and this is a unique aspect of our training. No one is expected to come in and have all the answers. This is a really important time that we have to get into groups to talk with one another about the scenario or issue and focus, and really practice like sharing that insight. We'll come back together after about 10 minutes or so, and then Shakira will help us facilitate a larger conversation. Each group has been assigned a discussant leader. So if any of you are interested in the future as trained navigators to come back and to, like Louisa, help us with this facilitation, it's great practice and also a great way to stay connected, and we appreciate your time. So it's an important part of our training, and we encourage you all to, I'm going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms, and you will see that you'll have a room that appears and you just click on the button to join. If you get disconnected, go ahead and come on back and you can reconnect to your breakout group. I will also post a message about 1 minute before our time is up, and you will see a message that flashes that says you have about a minute, and then we'll have about 59 seconds as we to break free of the group and come back to the bigger group. Those who are leading, if you can just jot down some notes, when we get back, you'll have an opportunity to share out some of the wisdom that your group or questions from your group to the bigger group. Okay, so with that, I will go ahead and open up the breakout rooms now. You should start to see your breakout room, and you can just click on that to join.
Mention that, pointing it out, like, oh, they are Muslim American youth, and I would point out a resource that I am available to so that they can connect with other Muslim American youths to have that community. Because it's one thing for me to understand a situation and being Latina and understanding the Muslim culture as well. And I just really appreciated that. And just our group had very different ways of noting how to validate their feelings without making them feel like a brush off.
Thank you, Natalie. Yes, we had a really lively discussion. Anna?
Oh, thank you. Well, we had a very active group and they were right on it as well. So it was really great. And they went right away to the first thing that was very important about validating her feelings, and that helping her by listening, and then suggesting counseling other than parents, someone neutral, perhaps a school counselor, and sharing other resources such as peer support groups her age that will help her also feel validated, have people with whom she can trust and that have similar experiences as her, and have learned from their own experiences and may have suggestions. Let's see. And then some stigmas that we saw in this situation. There was cultural stigma because the Middle Eastern American cultures are very different. So there's a religious stigma also, and especially when it said God is punishing the family, and then this religious indoctrination happening, and that should be, maybe look at it and talking about talk about feelings, and her pointed out that she's crazy or looks crazy, right? Also redefinition of, looking at what grateful is, no, it's not just okay, because we have had as human beings different experiences, and we can be grateful for different things. So being inclusive, certainly more support, and also understanding, and also including the external pressures on the family from the beliefs they have, and that maybe in the conversation stuff they might want to shift, hopefully. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. And one thing that, and I would like Shakira to confirm that this is correct. In America, and particularly in Washington State, a child at 13 doesn't necessarily need to get permission from their parents to access. So we need to access services. So we need to take that into consideration too, and make sure that we're not creating more problems for Sarah at home. And Edith had to leave, so she shared that some of the stereotypes or stigmas that her group identify were things like embarrassment to the family, cultural stigma, lack of understanding or empathy from the parents. And they shared that the role of the mental health navigator is something that I keep on hearing from all that have spoken so far. Listen to the person, be empathetic, and if they're open and able to access professional help, to give them resources and support, and always validating their feelings. Clarissa, what did your group come up with?
Yeah, so definitely a lot of similar ideas to what some of you all shared. But I think we really talked about the importance of, again, ensuring that Sarah feels like she can have a safe space to talk about her emotions. It's also important to connect Sarah to either to other resources, or like some of you shared, support groups with other Muslim Americans, or just third spaces where she might feel like, again, she can discuss a little bit more about her feelings and understand, connect with others, and feel validated throughout her situation. But again, we also discussed a lot the importance of approaching this through a more holistic approach. So again, helping the family to, or rather encouraging her family to also kind of be involved in this process to help ensure that there's healing, not just with Sarah, but rather there's like additional health education to help ensure that the family is also alongside her throughout this situation. So yeah.
Thank you, Clarissa. And that's an important thing, especially for our diverse communities of color that are family center, that it's important to not forget that part. And last but not least, Shakira, how did your group do? What did they share?
I did not have a group this time. I'm not sure if
Oh,
there was another one
oh,
out there that hasn't
no,
gotten reported back yet.
That's okay. That's totally fine. So thank you for confirming that youth age 13 and older can consent, can agree, can receive mental health care in Washington State without needing parental consent or permission. So thank you for that. Is something that I didn't know until my own baby hit 13 and they only needed me for the insurance signature. And independent of how any of us feel about their ability to make decisions at 13. And Shakira, you can probably speak more to this. That is to ensure that those who are having abusive, unhealthy relationships with adults in their life can still get help. Because my kid could, because that was what we wanted to do, but not all those relationships are the same. Do you want to add anything to that, Shakira, about the reasons why at 13 we are in this state we have that as part of our law?
I think you spoke to it well, so that youth can access mental health services at 13 and over without the consent of a parent in case they're not in safe home situations, or where there is a potential benefit to the youth that the parent maybe isn't on board yet. And a lot of mental health therapists will work with a young person to see if and when they might want to bring a parent in, if it's safe to do so, and what level of information they might want to share with their parents or caregivers. So it's funny, like you said, there's lots of times we talk with youth about like, well, parents are paying, so it would be helpful to have a release of information, permission to share with them when your appointments are. Sometimes you're like, I don't want my parents to know anything. And it's like, how are you going to get to the clinic, or who's going to pay? Are you paying for that? Or are caregivers or mom and dad paying for that? And they're like, ooh, yeah, they definitely need to know about that part. And then ultimately we can build some trust and relationship if it's safe for them to bring their parents in to share more about what they're getting some support about in therapy.
Oh, that's great. I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah, that's really good. Thank you. So let's move on to our do's and don'ts of a peer mental health navigator, and Shakira will walk us through, because it's important. We talked about what we do, but it's important also to know what we don't do.
Absolutely. And it seems like you all were really spot on in your groups that as a peer mental health navigator, you can really offer that support to the person that you're talking with or working with. You can absolutely focus on their strengths and their resilience factors. You can work to help them identify what their goals are and help them start to identify steps that they can take to achieve those goals. So maybe their goal is to feel happy again, and you can support them in figuring out what are things they like to do that make them feel happy, and would they be interested in seeking mental health therapy, and would they feel happier if they got in for a physical, if they haven't been in for a physical in a long time. Any number of things could be connected to their goals and supporting them in taking steps towards their well-being goals. And like you all said, you can offer resources. And like I said in the chat, I really appreciated hearing the attention that so many of you had to offering some culturally humble responses, to really keeping in mind um, how someone's culture and identity can impact how they move through life challenges and life's joys, and knowing the differences among our culture. I think for those of us, for many of us as BIPOC folks, we can feel a particular sense of connection, and my culture of origin might be really different than the culture of origin of the person that I'm talking with or supporting. And so being humble and curious in how we engage with someone around their culture is also really important. I think a couple other things we can do is talk about mental health in our communities to help increase understanding and awareness. We can challenge stereotypes or stigma when we hear it in the world. Um, those are just a few of the things that peer mental health navigators can do. And let's go to the next slide for some of the things that would be good for peer mental health navigators to not do or avoid. So some of the don'ts is that you don't have to have a professional license to be a peer mental health navigator. And it's important to know the distinction of your role as a peer mental health navigator versus the role of a licensed professional. You don't need to provide structured psychological support like therapy or counseling. You don't need to provide advice on medications or other medical matters. And it's interesting, that's a limitation I share with you as a licensed mental health professional. I am not an expert in medications for physical or mental health, and I never give advice about medications or medical conditions. Similarly, we're not lawyers. We don't give advice about legal matters. So knowing what our limits are, um, as peer mental health navigators, it's not your role to diagnose someone, even though we'll cover common diagnoses a few sessions from now, which will just be good for you to know and be aware of. It won't be your role to diagnose, but it will be helpful for you to have that information and background. And it's not a peer mental health navigator's job to help with someone's daily life tasks. I think that's a really important limitation to recognize, that not your role to become someone's caregiver or to take on their physical or mental health needs on a daily basis, but really the role is to help connect them to resources that can support them getting those needs met. And yes, I agree with what Danielle said about you can be open-minded and respectful of differences, and that really takes us a long way in building relationships And I will pass it on.
Thanks, Shakira. We have just a few minutes. If anyone has a question, I think we can take a couple of questions. You can also feel free to pose it in the chat. And then, of course, if there's something that comes to mind after our session today, feel free. We'll have these moments of Q&A in every session, so you don't have to go without your question being answered. And I'm sure Shakira would be happy also to answer some questions via email that you have. But yeah, let's just take a minute to see if there's any questions or comments. Oh, I also want to acknowledge that while everyone was in breakout sessions, Monica has provided, from our team, has provided just an example of a screening tool. And there are many out there, and we can't comment on which one is the best. But in case you're interested in looking at screening tools that embed ACEs, this would be one shared in the chat that you could look at. And it's also offered in different languages as well. It might be nice if you've never seen something like this to look at this as an opportunity just for self-reflection for yourself as a navigator, to look at perhaps in terms of ACEs and protective factors, what apply to your own life. Anna posted a question, Shakira, are there options for free mental health counseling in Washington State?
That's a great question. It's going to vary from person to person what is potentially available for them. So many of the community mental health centers around Washington State offer low cost or no cost mental health counseling, depending on someone's circumstances. So community mental health clinics can either help connect people to resources to receive healthcare, including mental health care, like connecting them with insurance providers or state-funded health insurance. And if they are not eligible for Washington Health insurance for any particular reason, they often offer sliding scale free or reduced services. So I would definitely recommend going to a community health center or a community mental health center as an avenue for that. And it looks like Monica dropped an option there that folks can look into as well. 988 hotline. Lisa, thanks for mentioning 988. 988 is a new-ish mental health or crisis hotline that folks can reach out to. It's a great resource to get connected to other supports or services for mental health, and is an option for people who may be experiencing a mental health crisis, or for any of you who may be supporting someone experiencing mental health challenges or crisis to call.
Yeah, and we'll actually be talking more about 988 and all of those services in later sessions. And just to wrap us up on time, these are great questions, and please feel free to note those for next time. And Natalie, thank you also for sharing in the chat more. This is the kind of engagement we love, you all. We're all helping out in this discussion. Thank you so much. Yeah, so why don't we go ahead? We just have a couple more slides just to share with you some exciting things coming our way in terms of training. A free webinar that we'll be hosting on April 17th on Zoom. It's called Unraveling Resistance, Breaking the Trauma Loop. We'll get to hear from Dr. Alina Soto and her background in working in this area on just strategies, but also talking about some of the latest research on trauma on the brain. We will offer English to Spanish translation. So as navigators, we would really appreciate your help with following us on social media, sharing this with those you know, and connecting them to registration, just so we can send out the Zoom information. So again, that's on April 17th. From 6:30, it will go until 8 o'clock. That includes a Q&A session. And Noemi, can you go to the next slide? Also, if you want more practice, we are hosting, along with the Forefront Center for Suicide Prevention, an in-person workshop on May the 1st, so May Day. That also will be in English with live Spanish translation on how to lead life-saving conversations and get more in-depth practice on how to help someone who might be struggling with their mental health, considering suicide. That will be held at Skagit Valley College, and we can see if there's a need for carpooling. We might be able to help organize for any of you who are interested in riding together to this event. We will have light refreshments at this as well. And again, that has a registration form. Oh, Julie, thank you so much for, oh, awesome, you all. Thank you so much. If you're interested, we can create a Google Doc and then connect you all, and Noemi can send that out with our follow-up from today, and we'll go ahead and get that carpool going. And our last but not least announcement is last year we had our very first Mental Health Arts Festival in Mukilteo. It was well attended. It was fun. It's looking at mental health through a really broad lens. It's not just about mental illness, it's also about thriving and learning and joy. This year, we are partnering with Skagit Valley College and in a beautiful Skagit Valley to host this festival. They've requested, because there's so many students there, that we host it on a weekday, but what we've done is extended that schedule to the evening. So those who are working can come in the evening. We have a film screening that will have Spanish subtitles as well about the connection between mental health and social media. There'll be interactive workshops. So if you've never done something like nature journaling or mindfulness, and Yiren, who is also on this call, on this Zoom, will be actually facilitating a workshop on easy yoga for everyone, mindfulness, sound bath experience. It's amazing. So please check it out. We actually have a MindFest event page on our website at mentalhealthmatterswa.com. You can click on MindFest and find all of that here, and all of that there, including a video. So please join us if you can. We're also looking for some volunteers if you want to get engaged in that as well. There's more information on the website. Yes, and this is how you can get connected with us. We've got Monica, who is our social media manager, who would love to have you follow. You can see us on Facebook, Instagram, and on our website, and you can send an email to us at info@mentalhealthmatterswa.com. Yes, thank you, Natalie. Yes, Michael Tooncap is going to be our keynote, and he is extremely inspirational, and we hope that you'll all get to hear that. Yeah, so next week, we look forward to seeing you all next week at 2 o'clock. And we will be talking about, as Shakira said, some of the most common diagnoses, symptoms, and we'll have some more scenarios to talk through. So we look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you all.